To present on the philosophy and practice of veganism, we are joined by Dr. Andrew Mills and Dr. Jessica Garrett Mills. Andrew Mills is a professor of philosophy and chair of the Department of Philosophy and Religion at Otterbein University, where he has taught since 1999. Educated at the University of Michigan and the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, Dr. Mills teaches courses in the history of philosophy, on the philosophy of death, as well as a popular course on our philosophical obligations to the non-human world. He has published work in the philosophy of language, on the pedagogy of philosophy, and on philosophical themes in Downton Abbey and Harry Potter. His essay, What's So Good About a College Education, has been used at colleges and universities across the country to introduce students to the value of a liberal arts education. Jessica Garrett Mills, PhD, the owner of On Track Academic Coaching, works with students from middle school to graduate school, helping them navigate executive functioning challenges. She's a native of Bexley who's been vegan since the 90s. She's a vegan activist, a mentor with vegan outreach, a vegan cooking class instructor, and together with Andrew is raising 2 young children on a vegan diet and a lifestyle of care and concern for animals and the environment. Again, thank you so much to both Andrew and Jessica. Before I send it over to them though, just a note to our viewers to send any questions that you have into the chat, and our presenters will take questions at the end of their presentation, but feel free to drop those questions in at any time. So Andrew and Jessica, thank you again, and I'll let you take it from here.
Thanks, Beth. Thanks everyone for coming. There's some familiar faces here, also some unfamiliar faces. So thanks for taking the time. So we're going to divide up the presentation basically in half. First, I'll talk about some of the philosophical issues and reasons why people might choose to be vegan or plant-based. And then Jessica's going to talk about some of the practical applications of how one puts this into practice in a lifestyle, especially around kids, but not exclusively. But before we, is this going to move? Oh, hang on a second. There we go. So we have reserved the shelter house at Jeffrey Park on August 8th for anyone who wants to come to a plant-based potluck. Please join us. The link there at the bottom takes you to a sign up genius. We'll have this slide up at the end again. So if you miss it, you can get the address and come bring your favorite plant-based food and bring kids. We'll be near the playground and it'll be a lot of fun. Okay. So first the philosophy of veganism, there's 2 arguments I think that move people. One is the sort of moral argument, thinking about ethical considerations regarding animals, and the other is an environmental argument, thinking about the effects of a plant-based diet on the environment. So I want to talk briefly about both of those arguments. First, the moral argument, and then the environmental argument. So this is a quote from Jeremy Bentham, a great British philosopher from a few hundred years ago. Let's see if my picture is covering the quote. There we go. So he encapsulates back a few hundred years ago the idea that I think motivates a lot of people when it comes to a reason to avoid eating animals, that we should think about the question of suffering and do everything we can to minimize the suffering of animals. And just as we try to minimize the suffering of other human beings. And the idea that there's some sort of important moral distinction between animals and human beings when it comes to the question of suffering, Bentham and others, as we'll talk about in a second, think that that distinction doesn't really matter. The question is whether they can suffer, and that's all that matters. Most recently, well, more recently than Jeremy Bentham, the Australian philosopher Peter Singer, who currently teaches at Princeton, has taught at, lives in New York, his work has been really important in the last 40 years around the question of veganism. His book, the Animal Liberation, has been really powerful. And Ingrid Newkirk, who is the founder of PETA, I think encapsulates a lot of people's views about Peter Singer's importance in driving people to a more plant-based way of life. So what I'm saying here is not original to me. This is basically Singer's argument that I want to encapsulate. And he's got 3 important concepts here. One is this notion of sentience. And this is a concept that really gets at the notion of whether you can feel. So beings that can have experiences, that can feel, are sentient beings. So grass is alive, but I think we'd all agree doesn't feel anything, doesn't have experiences. but dogs certainly do, and chickens and pigs and cows and goats, and you and I certainly do have experience. So we're all sentient beings because we have inner lives and have feelings and can feel, importantly, pleasure and pain. That's the important notion here. The second important notion is this idea of interests. And as sentient beings, we all have interests. We have interest in finding pleasure. We have interest in avoiding pain. We have an interest in having our belly scratched. We have an interest in being safe. So among the interests we have, some of them are trivial, like my interest in watching a TV show, and some of them are significant, like my interest in avoiding suffering and avoiding great pain. And so that distinction between trivial interests and significant interests is going to be really important to Singer's argument. And the final idea is this notion, and this is a term, I don't think Singer invented the term, but he's deployed it, I think, most famously, this idea of speciesism. And it's meant to be a sort of parallel to racism or sexism. The idea that a racist or a sexist thinks that people who are of a different race or a different sex, that their interests don't count as much. And the idea is that we should avoid being speciesists and think that simply because a sentient being is a dog or a cat or a pig or a chicken or a horse, that their interests don't count as much as the interests of human beings. We wouldn't say that about people of different races. We wouldn't say that about people of different sexes. And Singer argues that we shouldn't say that about beings of different species. So to avoid being a speciesist, it's a hard word to say, just like we should try to avoid being racist and sexist. So here's basically the argument. The argument goes that any sentient being, and that's us as well as the dogs and cats, that we have interests. As I said, interests in avoiding pain, let's say. And because all sentient beings have interests and should be treated equally, what that means is that we need to give equal consideration to the interests of all the sentient beings. When we're about to do something, we should take the interests of any being who's affected by our choice into consideration. And their interests should be considered equally, should have equal weight. And that seems pretty straightforward. If I'm deciding to take some course of action that might hurt people, the fact that I might hurt someone who's of a different religion from me or a different race from me or a different sex from me shouldn't matter. They have an interest in avoiding pain, just like I have an interest in avoiding pain, and I should take that into account. Now, when it comes to eating animals, and especially so CAFO, confined area farmed operation animals, so factory farm, I think is the more colloquial term, that eating those kinds of animals, and it's not the only case, but it's a pretty clear case, so I want to start there, that eating those kinds of animals fails to give equal consideration to the interests of the animals we eat. And the idea is that I have an interest in having a tasty meal. And that's an interest of mine, that's an interest of yours, it's an interest of everyone's, that we have an interest in having a tasty meal. But the animals have an interest in avoiding pain and suffering. But my interest in having a tasty meal is relatively trivial when it comes in comparison to the animal's interest in avoiding pain and suffering. So if I'm going to eat the animal, let the animal endure the pain and suffering being in a factory farm so that I can have a tasty meal, then I failed to give an equal consideration to the interests of those animals because I've given much more weight to my trivial interest in having something tasty on my plate compared to the animal's significant interest in avoiding pain and suffering. So it follows we shouldn't eat animals, especially the factory farmed animals. And there's an argument to be had about what about the non-factory farmed animals, right? That's a harder case. I think it's pretty clear we shouldn't eat them either. It's a somewhat harder case. So I want to focus on the factory farmed animals since those are the animals that most of us end up eating anyway. The animals that are in the grocery store and in the restaurants, most of them are factory farmed. So the idea is that to think about this notion of equal consideration, this is really Singer's main idea, that your interest in a bunch of things, so here are some things you have an interest in, freedom or having delicious food or clean water, is just as important as my interest in it. The fact that it's you versus me doesn't matter. Your interest in freedom is just as important as my interest in freedom. And so, as I said before, right, that a trivial interest shouldn't have more weight than a significant interest. So eating the hamburger, this woman here on the left is eating the hamburger. She wants a tasty hamburger. Who wouldn't? But to satisfy her trivial interest, these cows over here on the right need to have a pretty crappy life of suffering. And so another way to think about it is that what species a sentient being is doesn't matter. So many of us would just recoil at the idea of eating a dolphin or a chimpanzee. But we don't recoil, many of us who aren't plant-based, we don't recoil at the idea of eating a cow or a pig. But to think that it's okay to eat the cow and pig and not okay to eat the chimp or the dolphin is odd from Singer's point of view. Species membership doesn't matter. If the life of the chimp or the dolphin is super important and their interests should be respected, then so should the interests of the pig and the cow. And so this idea actually has showed up in Britain. This is just from last week. There's a bill currently in the House of Lords in the English Parliament where they're debating this animal welfare bill, where they're asking, this is coming from the government, from Boris Johnson, that they're asking if the bill was to become law, that animal welfare be taken into consideration by government agencies when anything that happens in the UK, they have to think about how it affects the welfare of sentient beings. And lobsters are there because lobsters might be sort of a border case of whether they're sentient or not sentient. So the newspaper picked lobsters, but easier cases of pigs and cows and chickens and goats and so on. So just this notion of sentience is currently being debated by the House of Lords. So that's the moral argument. And that moves some people, but the environmental argument, I think, moves a lot of people also. So Jessica says there are too many words here on the screen, and she's right. There were more words on the screen last week, so I took some of them off. So there was a recent article, not recent, a couple of years ago, where someone investigated the environmental impacts of the different ways we raise protein. And if you care about reducing your carbon footprint, not just your greenhouse gas emission, but acidification, things that are in the water, land use, water use, the number one thing you should do is go plant-based. It's more effective than not flying or buying a solar-powered car. So if the previous argument didn't move you and you're moved by environmental considerations, you should think about moving to a plant-based diet. In fact, as you'll see in a second, you can have pretty significant effects, even if you're already eating very environmentally good beef. You're still better off not eating that and eating plant-based diet. And there's so much land that could be restored to being wild habitat. So if you're concerned about species extinction, you could, if the world moved to a plant-based diet, reduce by 75%, right? The current acreage that's devoted to farmland, and that more wild areas could return, and there could be more habitats for other species instead of domesticated animals. So here's a graph from this fellow's research. So what they're showing you here is how farmed animal products contribute to various factors. So in terms of the number of calories that are generated by all the meat, it's 18% of the total calories that human beings consume, but it uses 83% of the farmland to produce 18% of the calories. The greenhouse gas emissions are huge. The water pollution is huge. Even the protein, if you're thinking not about calories, but about protein, a lot of people are concerned about protein, right? That you still don't get as much bang for your buck in terms of protein from farmed animals. So this graph shows the researchers looked at like thousands of farms and actually figured out how environmentally sustainable and environmentally good, let's say, farming practices were. So the bar, so for the beef at the far end toward the right is the worst, environmentally worst beef farm, cattle farm. And the little dot at the left over by the 20 is the best, environmentally best, right? Grazing and fantastic land and reusing everything. But if you look at the beef line at the top and you go all the way, well, maybe 2/3 of the way down and look at the tofu line, that shows the range of, right, greenhouse gas emissions at the best farm and at the worst farm. And you can see even the best beef farm is probably 5 or 6 times worse than the worst tofu farm. So if what concerns you is greenhouse gas emission, eliminating beef, even moving to just get beef and move to pig and fish, right, and poultry, you still are doing so much better than beef, but you do a whole lot better if you move down to the bottom rows where you're thinking about tofu and nuts and peas and so on. So from greenhouse gas concerns, right, this is a reason to go vegan. Here just shows you, again, if you're thinking about protein, the cost per gram of protein, right, is pretty low for the vegan items and gets super high here for the beef and the lamb and the goat. So some people move by the moral argument. The data here is pretty convincing to me that if you're moved by the environmental argument, right, that you should move to a plant-based diet. The last thing I want to talk about, and this will sort of transition over to what Jessica's going to say, is worries about purity. And I encounter this a lot with people who are thinking about transitioning and worried that they can't be perfect. I can't be the perfect vegan because I can't possibly give up cheese, or I have to have turkey on Thanksgiving, and they think I can't do it. And I want to say, don't worry about it, right? Nobody's a perfect vegan. So don't worry about being perfect. Worry about being good or better, but don't worry about being perfect. Is there a label for the thing you are? There's all these labels. Some of them make sense. Some of them seem a little oddball, but it doesn't matter. If there's not a label for the thing you are because you eat turkey on Thanksgiving and you have cheese when you're traveling in France, fine, right? Who cares what the label is, right? This is not even all the labels there are for the different kinds of vegans there can be. And finally, and I think this makes sense from the environmental point of view, right? We talk about this notion of reducing your carbon footprint. We think it's better to reduce our carbon footprint. If I'm releasing or responsible for fewer kilograms of greenhouse gases tomorrow than I am today, then that's good, right? So it's okay if I'm not perfect. What I should strive to be is better. And I want to think of this as well from the moral point of view. So reduce your cruelty footprint. This is trademark Andrew Mills. Reduce your cruelty footprint, right? Try to be a little better tomorrow than you are today. Reduce down the number of animals you're eating in any one day and try to make it less the next day. So that's my bit. I'm going to stop and hand the microphone over to Jessica, who's going to put this into practice.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the practice of veganism, particularly what might you eat, what might you do about kids that you're responsible for feeding, and being vegan in a world with other people who are not. Okay, so the first thing I want to say is you're already eating a lot of vegan food. If you think through what you eat in a day or in a week, like French fries, they're vegan. Apples, all the fruit and vegetables you eat, already vegan. Pasta, vegan. Almost all pasta from the grocery store is vegan. Most of the bread from the grocery store, already vegan. PB&J, vegan. There's lots of vegan food that you're already eating. So this is not, if you're going from, I'm curious, but I'm not vegan at all, and I maybe want to think about it. This doesn't have to be this monumental leap into the unknown. We can think about vegan swaps. So for instance, swapping for milk is relatively easy. You just have to find a plant-based milk, and I'll talk about that in a sec. If you cook, sometimes people are concerned about what to do about butter. Swapping for fats is also pretty darn easy. You can swap for margarine. You can swap with vegetable oil or olive oil or whatever. The fat swap is easy. Swapping for meat. Well, there's lots and lots and lots of plant-based meat products out there, to say nothing of like beans and tofu and all of the other plant-based proteins. No, you're not going to have a steak if you're vegan, but I would argue that most of the, if it's not steak, anything less, you can get pretty darn close. Oh, and then the last thing is eggs. Eggs are a little trickier. It's not that you can't swap for eggs. I bake all the time for my family, and I just swap out different things for eggs. It's slightly more complicated. And if people have questions afterwards, like, what could I swap for eggs in this recipe? I have an answer for you. Also, there are new products coming out all the time. There's a product by, I don't remember who, called Just Egg. They also have Just Mayo. And that comes in a bottle, and it's a 1-for-1 swap for eggs. You can even scramble it. And from what I hear, it's really good. I've never tried it because it's expensive. Cheese, again, Andrew mentioned like, oh, but I can't be vegan because I have a trip planned to France and I want to eat cheese there. Okay, like, let's just deal with day to day. The Mills family favorite vegan cheese includes Follow Your Heart cheese, BioLife cheese, Miyoko's, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Field Roast has this sliced chow cheese, which you can get at Kroger. The top three, Bexley Food Co-op has them, some of them, like selected things from some of them. Whole Foods has them. Daya, also Kroger has, and they have shreds. It's not the best, but it totally works on pizza. Swapping for milk. If you're thinking of switching from cow's milk to a plant-based milk, I think you should make it fun. And if you're doing it with your family, do a taste test, invite another family over, get a whole bunch of different vegan milks and see which one do you like the best. Silk is our everyday milk here at the Mills household, but, or, store brand soy milk. My kids think that Ripple, they call it dessert milk. I get that at Target. Get the original, don't get the unsweetened if you're trying to convince a kid. Lots of people like rice and oat milk as sort of an entry-level plant-based milk. Cashew milk is really creamy. Almond milk, people like, I don't know, I don't like it. There's flax milk, there's a lot. What I'm saying is there's a ton of different milks to try. I don't know which one you're gonna like best. Any of them work in baking. Any of them work as a swap in recipes, but you just have to figure out what you like, and you only know that when you try. Okay, so how to start. If this is like your first step into plant-based diet, I recommend trying plant-based Mondays. There was, what was that? Vegetarian Mondays?
Meatless Mondays.
Meatless Mondays, yeah. So that was a thing for a while. Try doing it plant-based. Make a list of things that you already like, that you're already eating that are vegan, and see if you can build some meals out of that. Or try plant-based Mondays with a new recipe every Monday until you have kind of a catalog of things you like, and then you can just rinse and repeat those. Mark Bittman, who's a New York Times columnist, he has his way of doing veganism is vegan before 6 p.m. So breakfast and lunch are vegan. That's a great way to start too. On those plant-based Mondays, what might you eat? Tacos with beans, burgers. Every week, try a different burger from the grocery store, all their plant-based burgers. My kids are obsessed with ramen with all of the fixins that we add in there. Pasta, there are lots of different meatballs to try in the frozen food section. Pizza, we make pizza at our house because it's much cheaper, but there are lots of places around Columbus that now have plant-based pizzas. Grain bowls, which you can deconstruct if you have people that don't like different foods touching other foods. You can just have rice in one section and vegetables in another, and then beans or any kind of meat substitute in another. And then I think that a plant-based Monday carryout situation would be totally legit. If every Monday you just pick a different vegan restaurant around Columbus and carry out from them, great. You're helping the small businesses recover, and you're eating your plant-based diet, and you don't have to cook. Okay. The way I usually think about planning meals at our house is very basic, like what is our starch? What is our vegetable? What is our protein? This is probably what you're doing with your own meals at home, though maybe you're not breaking it down because you just have set meals, but try and deconstruct that. And again, think about what fruits and vegetables you're already making that are already vegan or could pretty easily become vegan. Potatoes, rice, pasta, bread, corn, there's lots of things in the starch category. Probably all you're going to have to do is sub out the butter if you're using that. Protein, you have to be slightly adventurous, though most kids, when hungry, will eat lots of things. A word about protein. A few words. You basically don't have to worry about it, especially with kids. If your kids are getting enough calories in a day, they're getting enough protein. A 37-pound 4-year-old needs 16 grams of protein a day. That is just not a lot of protein. I got this RDA off the internet, so I checked a bunch of places. I assume that's fine. So 16 grams a day. This is in amounts that my 4-year-old eats. Oats plus soy milk in the morning, 11 grams. So there, he's practically met his protein requirements for the day. Lunch, PB&J, that I think I did a whole PB&J and a few peppers. Now he's got 15 additional grams. 1 vegan yogurt for a snack, 6 grams. I can guarantee my children eat more snacks than that, but we'll be reasonable here. And then a small serving of tofu and broccoli and rice for dinner is 41 grams of protein. Some might argue that's too much. Adult protein needs are only more because we weigh more. But adult protein needs are something for like an average sized person, something around 50 grams a day. And again, like this is child sized portions and it's already 41 grams. Protein's just not a concern. People freak out about protein. You don't have to freak out about protein. B12 is a vitamin that you do have to supplement, but you can just give your kid a gummy vitamin, like a multivitamin. It's got plenty of B12. You can also buy B12 supplementation if that's all you want. You don't want them to have the multivitamin. Yeah, that's all I'll say there. Some more high value protein things, if I haven't yet convinced you that protein's not a concern. Chickpeas, edamame, 19 grams per cup. I mean, it's a lot. 1 cup of protein and your kid has met their protein needs for the day. Lentils, black beans, kidney beans, lots of protein sources. Vegetables have protein, bread has protein, grain has proteins. You're going to be fine. Okay, so what to eat? I would encourage you to think about this not as a chore, but as a eating adventure. This is an opportunity to try new things, to do taste tests, to eat in new places, to try new vegetables at the grocery store. If your kid will die without their exact brand of mac and cheese, then ease in slowly. Everything else is vegan except for the Kraft mac and cheese. Okay, fine, do that for a while. If you're starting from day one with kids, it's a lot easier. I will admit that. But I think by giving them some outs, like, okay, so we have a Kraft mac and cheese caveat, everything else is vegan. Like Andrew was saying, we're aiming for better than yesterday. And so you can get there and work with your kids' specific needs. We have a rule in our house, which is don't yuck my yum. Sometimes one kid will be really into a vegetable and the other isn't. And if you've got one kid saying like, oh, it's disgusting, they can kind of like turn the other kid off from it. So I recommend that rule in your house too, if you're trying to introduce new foods and not have one person kind of ruin it for everyone else. Okay. Cookbooks are awesome. If you like, I don't know, if you like recipes. Just 2 that I really like. Isa Chandra's books are all great, but I particularly like Isa Does It. PETA's Vegan College Cookbook. There is nothing sophisticated there. It's all very basic. Open a can of this, pour in a can of that. But if you don't really like to cook and you just need to get some recipes on the table, or if you have a teenager who might be compelled to cook along with you, that's a good one to check out for very basic recipes. This is the vegan cookbook section at the Bexley Public Library. There are so many awesome books, and then there are like a billion more available through the consortium. So just like go browse and see what you like. The web, of course, has a million places to check for recipes. Here are some that I sometimes browse. The Vegan 8, all of these, they also have a cookbook, of course. The Vegan 8 is good because it's, I think, theoretically only 8 ingredients per recipe, though they kind of fudge a little. Vegan Richa, she is Indian and she has a lot of great Indian recipes, but also recipes from around the world. Hot for Food is a lot of like kind of junk food recipes. It Doesn't Taste Like Chicken is basics. Same with Connoissaurus Veg. And I like Chocolate Covered Katie for pretty straightforward, non-weird ingredient baked goods and desserts. She has a lot of gluten-free stuff too, if that's a concern. Okay. So like I was saying, your strategy is going to depend here if you're trying to get some kids to come along for the ride. If you have little kids and you can just make the rule and they don't know the difference yet, little kids are often open to eating a lot of strange things that they don't know yet that they're not supposed to like. So that's to your advantage. If you have big kids, you have to decide like the balance between family rules and autonomy. And every family is going to strike that balance differently. In order not to make meals a battleground, another rule that we follow is this division of responsibility in our house, where I or Andrew, we make the food, we decide what's going to go on the table, and then the kids decide what goes in their mouth. So they choose from the options, and sometimes they don't like the options. And then we do allow a couple like get out of jail free cards. They can pick, like usually it's like PB&J or cereal. Nothing super exciting, but if they absolutely hate what's on the table, then they can, the older one, the 7-year-old can fix it for herself and the younger one will fix it for him. This is not worth making the meal a fight, because you're certainly not going to win a bunch of vegetable eating vegans if you make it into a battle. See if you can get your kids involved both in the shopping and the choosing of recipes, or going to the farmer's market and picking cool things and tasting them. Kids, you know, they don't have super adventurous palates, but fruits and vegetables are all pretty palatable as long as they don't know that they're not supposed to like them. And you might find, and you know, maybe if you're trying this and your kid is in that like sticky spot, like you're brand new vegan and they're 4 or 5 or 3, you might have to just go slow and figure it out. But if they are 6 months old, that's easy. And if they're teenagers, you might be able to get them involved, or, you know, older kids, you might be able to let them watch some videos. If you really want to end up with a strident vegan, let them watch some stuff on YouTube and let them get involved. Let them feel that this is important to you and important to them and important for the world, and they might take it and run with it. Kids in the real world it doesn't have to be a fight. If you're worried about like, yes, we can be vegan at home and vegan at the restaurants, but what about at birthday parties? So just have like a caveat. Birthday cake is going to be vegan for us for now. Or I always try and send my kids with like the best looking cupcake that ever existed, so that like maybe their cupcake even looks better than the birthday cake. And then they don't feel like they're missing out. Same with play dates. Send snacks. That's a good rule for vegan families. Always always lots of snacks. And I don't think that's just vegan families either, but lots and lots and lots of vegan snacks for play dates. They can bring enough to share if you want to get the other kid involved and maybe eating. Just one more thing there. Sometimes, like our 7-year-old, she is fully on board with veganism. And sometimes I worry that she might go out into the world and kind of proselytize in an off-putting way. So we talk about how in our family, we have figured out how we can best be kind. And every family tries to find their own way to be kind in the world. And they might do it differently than us. And I'm sure as she gets older, she will have her own opinion on that. But for now, we try and help her not turn everybody off. Okay, so last few things, how you can be vegan in the real world, especially with friends and family, or when you're out at restaurants. Most restaurants, even like a steakhouse, if you call ahead 24 hours ahead and you say, I'm vegan, is there anything on the menu? I have never had a restaurant not say either that there's something that they can make, or no, but we'll make something for you. So And now there's so many restaurants that do have a vegan option on the menu. And there's fully vegan restaurants. There's lots to choose from. Now, family and friends, if you are an adult who you and your family are going vegan or trying to go slowly vegan, not everybody is going to understand. Lots of people at first like to push buttons and they like to make bacon jokes. You can just let that roll off. You can also set boundaries with your extended family. The magic phrase, I think, assuming it's true, is our pediatrician says that our children are eating a healthy diet. Because people will judge you about what you're feeding your kids sometimes. And then you can just like put it off on the expert. Our pediatrician says that our kids are eating a healthy diet. Ding. And sometimes people will get on you about like, how could you make food choices for your kids? Like, well, everybody makes food choices for their kids. So that, I don't know, that doesn't make sense to me. But sometimes people think that you're like abusing your kid by not allowing them to eat a McDonald's hamburger. Again, that's just boundary setting, but that's a whole nother talk. Okay, so we really hope you'll join us. We rented the whole shelter and we don't want to be just sitting there alone. So come sign up on the Sign Up Genius, tinyurl.com/plant-based Bexley. If you don't sign up, just come anyway. Invite your friends, even if they have no interest in veganism, but they think it might be like a funny thing to do on a Sunday afternoon, fine. Everybody come, it'll be fun. Okay, and that's our show.
All right. Thanks. So we can, I don't know how questions are happening. Are people, or Beth or Whitney can manage the questions?
Yeah,
so should I stop sharing the screen? Is that easier or?
I think you can,
Okay.
or leave it up. I don't think.
All right.
Let's leave that up.
I'll leave
for a
this up
second.
for a second.
Yeah, go ahead and leave that.
Okay.
Got that URL.
All
Yeah.
right.
So, thank you very much to both Andrew and Jessica for sharing that. If anyone has any questions, please go ahead. You can submit them to the chat, and we can collect those and start asking those questions. But I guess in the meantime, while we wait, maybe for other people to send some things, if you wanted to maybe each speak about like what you maybe thought was the hardest thing in your transition, each of your transitions, like maybe from.
I came later than Jessica. Jessica's been vegan since you're a teenager, more or less.
Yeah.
I was vegetarian for a while, and I'm still not fully vegan. I eat fish in certain situations. But I think, the hard thing for me was, in my head, I thought it meant like I could never have this thing again. I remember being in Austin at a conference, and some friends were going out to this barbecue place outside of Austin. It was over 20 minutes outside of Austin. It's the best barbecue in the whole entire world. And I wanted to hang out with my friends. And I thought, okay, tonight I'm going to have the barbecue, right? And because I wanted to hang out with my friends and I didn't want to just eat a potato there. And I get that some people, I think if Jessica had gone, she might have come and just had the potato and been fine with that. So I'm not judging that decision, but I think that idea of giving myself some, like this is a free day, and I don't do that very often. But I think once I figured out that I could give myself a free day every now and then things were fine. And I think now I've really become, I don't miss the stuff that I used to have, especially now that there's a lot of really good options. The Impossible Burger, I think, is great. That's helped a lot, I think.
I don't remember. I mean, it was a long time ago. I think sometimes interfacing with non-vegan family is tricky to navigate. So that's a current challenge, but I was 19. I mean, I only know how to cook vegan because I've never had a kitchen that is my own kitchen that hasn't been a vegan kitchen, because that's just how I learned to cook. So it wasn't really a challenge, I would say. Plus, if you've got that like 19-year-old fire in the belly about something, it's not so hard. Okay, Leslie asks, what percentage of the US population is vegan? Ooh, Kaylin, do you know?
It says.
Oh, Andrew just Googled it. how is that expected to change over the next 3 to 5 years? Anecdotally, I think it is changing. I don't know about like fully vegan, but I think the number of people that are exploring plant-based diets. I mean, if you just look at, like when I started to be vegan, again, it was like more than 20 years ago, there were like, I think there was one cookbook, and it was this super like hippy dippy cookbook, which is still a good cookbook. And now there's like shelves and like, I can't even keep track. It used to be every new vegan cookbook, I would buy it. And there's like tens a year. I don't know. It would be, I think it's growing. Yeah.
Just facing bullying for being vegan.
Oh, yeah, that's a hard one. Our kids have not, I think kids today are used to kids eating different foods, because at the lunch table, there's the kids that are allergic to this and the kids that are allergic to that. And our oldest is 7, so we might, I don't know, that's, teenage years are unnavigated terrain for us, and who knows, but so far that has just not at all, kids just don't care. They don't, they just haven't given her a hard time. As long as she doesn't hit them too hard with the vegan arguments, then the other kids just don't care. They're just used to it. Yeah. 0.5% vegan. Okay.
2% vegetarian, according to the
But I
website.
bet, is there something that says like the number of people that try to eat a vegan diet? Because I think there's a lot of people that fit into that category. It used to be when I would go out to a restaurant in the late 90s, nobody knew what vegan was. And now all servers know and have something to, most of them have something to recommend. So I just think it's exploding in a way that's really convenient for us.
When once, I think one of the things that we have trouble with is when we're traveling outside of a city, when we're like, we go apple picking out at Lynn's or something like that. And there's just, we want to stop and get lunch, and there really isn't aren't a lot of vegan options out there. Vegetarian, it's easy. There's always a cheese pizza to be had. So that's when we always like, we better pack lunch and take it with us, or pack some snacks and take it with us. In the city, or in any city is fine. It's sort of like outside of cities is when we have to be a little more prepared, and we can't just count on the fast food restaurant. But now that Burger King has the Impossible Whopper, which my son calls King Burger, which we're going to keep having him call King Burger, that's been great. We can stop at King Burger and just get it without the mayo, and we're fine.
Yeah. Anybody have like specific nitty-gritty questions? Oh, kid-friendly vegan restaurants. Well, again, like our kids have been vegan from the start, so they're obsessed with Ethiopian food, which is pretty kid-friendly. You get to eat with your hands, and there's very mild tasting things.
Asian food
is real easy for them, and you can do like white rice and that, if steamed veggies, if that's what if you have a picky eater. Specifically, Eden Burger, which is in the Short campus area, is very kid friendly. There's only outside eating, so you have to go on a day that it's good to eat outside.
Yeah, they're not great in restaurants to begin with. So
and COVID, like, I don't know. Suggestions for stir fry tofu. Oh, okay. So if you dredge it in cornstarch first, it'll get crispy. We usually, because we're cooking tofu for a big eating family, we usually bake it in the oven. And you can toss it in oil and bake it, and it gets
crispy that way.
It gets crispy that way. It doesn't get like Asian restaurant crispy, because they are like triple battering it and then doing it in a deep fryer. So if you've got a deep fryer, there are some options there for you, but I'm not about to deep fry tofu for my family on a regular basis.
There are a couple kid books that we like. There's one, Linus the Vegetarian T-Rex.
Yeah,
has been a super favorite.
What's the Thanksgiving
Oh,
one?
there's what's the Thanksgiving one?
Twas the night before Thanksgiving.
Yeah, so these kids go out. It's all written like twas in the night before Christmas meter, and the kids rescue these turkeys who are going to be killed by old farmer Mac Nugget.
Yeah.
That's a good one. There was another one after.
Oh, Grandma Gomez.
Granny Gomez
and Jigsaw. She has a pig who she adopts this pig because it's not a vegan book, but she adopts this pig because he's gonna go to the slaughterhouse, and she ends up like, he comes into her house and she wants to build him a barn, and she builds him this awesome barn, and then she ends up going to live with him in the barn. It's really cute.
Yeah.
There's this one called V is for Vegan, which was really scary for my kids.
Yeah, there's some that were very like, here's what happens in the slaughterhouse, and that didn't work for us.
It was too scary.
Yeah. But Linus the Vegetarian T-Rex that's I think our favorite one.
Yeah.
Oh, I just bought one. What was that one I just bought? At the museum. Vegasaurus or something.
I don't know, dinosaurs, apparently. They're big into the vegan dinosaurs. That was British though.
I know, when we learned that like a lot of the dinosaurs are herbivores, right? So like the Triceratops and the Stegosaurus are herbivores. Like then our son was like totally into that.
Yeah.
They're not all meat-eating T-Rexes. I think one of the things that we found trickiest is the interaction with, well, we have dinner with our extended family frequently, and they're not at all vegan, the opposite. And so I think like having those interactions and trying to negotiate the hospitality obligation with the vegan obligation. So when we host dinner at our house with our family, we won't cook meat in our house, but sometimes, Jessica's mother will bring meat to eat at dinner, and we've decided we're fine with that. Or you want to put something on our grill, fine, put it on the grill. And I mean, there are other people who would make a different choice and say like, this is a vegan house and no meat allowed. And that's a legitimate choice too. And we've just decided to balance. We want to see our family and have dinner with them. And our kids, like they'll look at something, and our son, Solly, calls everything that's not vegan as cow. So like, he'll say, is that cow? We'll say, yes. Like, is that cake cow? Yes, it's cow, which means like it's not vegan. And he'll say, okay, fine, I can't have it. Like he doesn't miss it. And so that has been, I think, the hardest thing for us is negotiating, meals together with people who aren't vegan.
Yeah. And I think making those choices about how to negotiate it in your own household, about like, is the grill, like for us, I don't want to cook meat in the house, but we've decided the grill is okay. You just have to, and actually when Andrew, when we first started living together and he wasn't vegan yet, we had a drawer in the fridge that was like his cheese drawer. So again, like I know some people that are like, no, I'm not going to date anybody that's not, but a lot of you guys, if you're here and you might have some people in your family that want to go along for the ride and others that don't, and you just have to negotiate that for yourself. And I mean, I imagine when our kids get to be teenagers and they have money, I'm not going to say like you can't spend that money on non-vegan stuff if it's their money and they want to make that choice.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, they're autonomous beings.
We can decide this right now. But so again, like it doesn't have to be a battle with your kids. I don't know. Does anybody have a kid that they think that they want to bring along for the ride, but they think it would be a no-go?
I think it's all people we know who are left.
It's not a religion, it's a dietary choice. Yeah. No, I mean, for some of us, it's closer to a religion. And I think people get weird about, like, if you are making a choice that they are not making, people get weird about food. But they'll get over it. All right.
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah.
First of all, thank you guys so much. We really enjoyed hearing. We have to hop off here, but I did just want to mention about the tofu. if you dredge it in cornstarch and stick it in an air fryer, like spray it with a little bit of like vegetable oil spray or olive oil spray and stick it in the air fryer, that also gives it a good kind of fry situation going on too.
That's good.
Awesome. Thanks, Raina.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Bye. Okay.
All right.
We'll come to the thing, so we're not sitting there at the shelter house alone.
Thanks, Beth. For
Yeah,
setting
thank
us up.
you. Yeah, thank you both so much. And thank you to all of our viewers. And yeah, hopefully we'll see y'all at the potluck.
All right.
Great.
All right.
All right.
Bye.
All right. Have a good night.
Thanks.